Today we're going to talk about this, the risk of renting an automobile. Not uncommon. Someone takes a vacation, they fly in, they want to rent a car, they get to the rental car counter, and they just ask a simple question. Do you want to buy our insurance? Well, technically it's not insurance. Technically it's a waiver, damage waiver that's inserted into that contract. But everybody refers to it as insurance and say, should I buy their insurance or not? So we're going to go with that terminology and just say, you know what? It's rental car insurance. First, a disclaimer. Personal auto policies vary, sometimes from state to state, different outside of the United States. So we're going to draw the assumption that we're talking about personal use of an automobile on someone's vacation. Next, we are going to assume that you have this. That would be a personal auto policy. And a personal auto policy is going to have coverage in it for liability, comprehensive, collision, uninsured motorist, medical payments. Like all insurance contracts, there's always exclusions and limitations. So your policy is going to have certain exclusions. It's going to have certain territorial limits that it applies to. And don't forget that your policy is going to have a deductible. Let's take these one at a time. Exclusions. Typical exclusions, we do not cover intentional damage to an automobile. So if you intentionally cause damage by off-roading the automobile on a rental car agreement, we're not going to cover that. The policy also has territorial limits, and they're very limited. Basically, it's United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. Anything other than those are not in the territorial limits. So anything in European countries, Grand Cayman, Acapulco, St. Martin, St. Thomas, all those Caribbean places, there will be no coverage on your personal auto policy. So as we can see, you are right here in the middle. And you have two contracts that will be affecting you. You will have, first of all, the personal auto policy, the coverages and exclusions there, but the rental car agreement is a separate contract. It would be a good idea to call your agent and ask this question. Hey, I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to Florida, I'm going to rent a car, and the typical question would go like this. Do I need to buy their insurance at the rental car company, or am I covered? And what your agent might well say to you is, you know, your personal auto policy over here does provide coverage for a non-owned auto. And you know what? A rental car is simply a non-owned auto. He might also say, subject to the same coverages, exclusions, territorial limits, and deductibles. Therein becomes the challenge, because you have two contracts, and over here you are entering into a rental car agreement and contract. Now, this contract's no different than leasing a building, and in that contract you're going to assume certain responsibilities and potential liabilities, and that's what we want to talk about. What is the difference between what the rental car agreement over here makes you liable for and what the personal auto policy over here would pay for? Let's start by identifying some things that we have seen in rental car agreements that you are absolutely responsible for. The first one, and the most common one that we have seen, is this one: loss of rents. The problem is that if you do wreck their car, it may take days or weeks for them to repair the car. While the car's in the shop, they cannot rent the car. And most rental car agreements make you responsible for those loss of rents. Another issue that we have seen recently in a rental car agreement that we reviewed a couple of months ago was this one: diminished value. To explain diminished value would be if you did cause damage to their car. A wrecked car is not worth as much as a car that hadn't been wrecked, and we call that diminished value. We recently reviewed a rental car agreement that had a schedule that if the car is worth $35,000, you cause $5,000 worth of damage, you're responsible for X amount. The more damage you cause, the more you're responsible for. So now the obvious question is, of all these things that I have said I'm going to be responsible for under this separate contract, the question is, how will my personal auto policy respond to these types of liabilities that I have assumed? And here are some answers. We have seen some personal auto policies that would pick up this one: loss of use or loss of rents to their automobile. Not all policies do. Actually, the wording that we look for in the contract is what is called consequential loss coverage, but not all policies have that. I have never seen a personal auto policy pick up this one, diminished value. So you certainly have an exposure there that you have assumed responsibility for, and yet there would be no coverage under your personal auto policy. Some people say, yeah, but what about this? I will use that Visa card. Well, and that can work out fairly well. The challenge is that you now have another contract. So now you got to look at this contract to determine if it's going to provide you any coverages for some of those things. And I have seen Visa agreements that would pick up loss of rents, personal use of an automobile on a personal Visa card, but I have never seen a card agreement that would pick up this one called diminished value. So in summary, you're right in the middle of an insurance company, a rental car company, and even possibly a credit card company to figure out what liabilities you're assuming under the rental car agreement and determining what coverages you might have on a personal auto policy. Again, we're not recommending that you buy the coverage or not. We just think it's important that you understand the risk. You might take a few things into consideration, how the length of time you're going to have the automobile, how familiar you are with the area that you're driving in, how much you're going to be driving. You may only be using the car to get to and from the airport, but it is important that you do understand the risk, and we hope that this sheds some light on the rental car question: should I buy their insurance or am I covered?